Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and we are back with another episode of the Underhive Wars. This is our series of weekly Necromunda battle reports, and this is battle report number 44. It is a show of force scenario that is fought between my two friends, Sister Serial as well as Sergeant Sigmarine. Sister Serial is playing Precinct 13 of the Palanite Enforcers, while Sergeant Sigmarine is playing the Sleeping Dogs of House Delaque. They'll be playing a scenario called Show of Force, which is one of the brand new scenarios from the Necromunda's Book of Ruin, the latest supplement to come out for the Necromunda gaming system, and they'll be throwing it down exactly to see which of these gangs will be dominant in the Sector 7 turf war. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to play some background music real quick. If you want to see exactly what these gangs are bringing for this scenario, go ahead and pause and take a look at your own leisure. So with that being said, let's get this battle report on a roll.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Alright, so let's go and talk about the scenario rules for this one. This one is called Show of Force. For the crews on both sides, the attacker gets a custom selection of D3 plus 7 fighters that they set up at the beginning of the scenario, and the rest of their fighters will remain as reinforcements, showing up one turn at a time. After that point, the defender gets a random selection of D3 plus 5 fighters from their gang. For deployment, this is standard deployment on both sides of the battlefield, and basically we have some different objectives being achieved by both gangs. For the first one, it's called Shock and Awe, and this is for the attacker. The attacker earns 1 victory point for each defender they manage to take out of action, as well as 2 victory points if the defender was taken out of action within 6 inches of another defender as well. So really important to take out people within groups for the attacker. And then for the objective for the defender, it's called Back into the Shadows, and the idea for these guys is that they're trying to escape by infiltrating through the battlefield to the opposite edge of the table. If they get within 2 inches of the table edge and are not engaged, they manage to escape, earning 1 victory point for each escape attempt. Also, they earn a victory point for each attacker that they also manage to take out of action as well. The victory conditions for this one is whoever has the most victory points ends up winning. For the rewards for credits, the attacker earns D6 times 10 credits into their stash for each defender they manage to take out of action. For experience, each fighter participates in the scenario earns 1 point of experience, as well as 1 point of experience for each defender who managed to escape as well. For the reputation, plus 3 D3 reputation points for the victorious gang, and of course, as always, if either gang bottles out, they lose 1 point of reputation as well. So with the scenario rules over, let's go and talk about deployment real quick. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, my friend Sister Serial is deployed on the near side of the table, while Sergeant Sigmarine is deployed on the far side of the table. Pretty much the objective for the scenario is for Sister Serial to move from her side of the table, infiltrate across the battlefield to the far side, and hopefully escape with the most of her fighters intact and earn as many victory points as she possibly can. And it's up to Sergeant Sigmarine's job in order to try to stop her from doing that, and he's going to try his very best to do so. As for their battle plan, I'm not really sure what their plan of attack is on this one. I'm just the arbitrator in this battle report, so all I'm doing is taking the photos. All their actions are based on them, so you would have to ask them what their battle plans were on this one. But it looks like it's pretty obvious what's going on for the most part. So with the battle plan over, let's go and talk about deployment real quick. So, starting with Sister Serial, as well as Precinct 13 of the Palanite Enforcers. On the front left-hand side there, that character is called Judge Mason. Judge Mason is a Palanite patrolman who's equipped with mesh armor, a high straw energy shield, bolt pistol, as well as blasting charges. They got the House of Ansar legacy, as well as a specialist skill. Right behind them is Judge Fear, who's a Palanite captain. That character's armed with carapace armor, a maul, an enforcer bolt gun with penetrating rounds. He's got the commanding presence as well as the nonverbal communication skills as well. Right smack dab in the middle, that is Judge Cold, who is a Palanite patrolman. He's equipped with mesh armor, an armored undersuit. He's got an enforcer bolt gun, penetrating rounds, a maul, and frag grenades. He's got the spinal injury as well. And then right next to him on the top right hand side up there, that is Judge Dodd. I believe that is the character's name. Judge Dodd is Judge Dodd's name. He's a Palanite Enforcer who's got a flak armor, an armored undersuit, an enforcer bolt gun with penetrating rounds. He's also got a stub gun with dum-dum bullets. Right behind him is Judge Nock, who's another patrolman, who's armed with layered flak armor, an armored undersuit, a sniper rifle, as well as a stub gun with dum-dum rounds. And finally on the right-hand side, that is the Interceptor, which is a Styber Mastiff with a Savage Bite. And that pretty much makes up Sister Serial's deployment on this one. Alright, so for my friend Sergeant Sigmar, he actually starts with 10 members of his gang being on this one, with the other 3 being left in reserve. Up in the top left-hand corner there, that is Reckless. He's a ganger armed with flak armor. He's got photo goggles, a grenade launcher with frag and crack grenades. He's also packing 2 auto pistols. And right in front of him is the gang champion, Painless Joe. He's equipped with flak armor, a plasma gun. He's got auto pistol and photo goggles. He's got the fast shot as well as marksman skill. And then right below them is another 2-man fire team. Up in the front, that's John St. Jude. He is a champion. He's got flak armor, twin last pistols, photo goggles. He's also got the gunfighter and escape artist skills. And right behind him is Flamer Fred, who is another ganger who's equipped with flak armor with a flamer. He's also got a last pistol as well as photo goggles. And right smack down in the middle of Sergeant Sigmar's deployment zone, right beneath that walkway, that is Slight is his name. He is a ganger who's equipped with flak armor. He's got photo goggles, twin auto pistols, as well as frag grenades. And finally making up Sergeant Sigmar's right-hand flank, starting on the left and working to our right, starting on the left-hand side, that is, what's her name? Miss Spectre is her name. She's a ganger who's got a flak armor, photo goggles, a last gun, as well as a last pistol. Right in front of her is Silk, who's another ganger who's got flak armor, photo goggles, an auto gun, as well as a last pistol. Right behind them is their leader, Mr. Sinister. He's equipped with mesh armor, a long rifle with a mono-sight and gun shroud. He's got a last pistol and photo goggles. He's also got the commanding presence and overseer skill. Right in front of him, that is Drix the Maw, who is a spiker, House Delaque spiker. He's equipped with a displacer field. He's got the unsanctioned psyker special rule, flight special rule. He's got the psychic stream, psychic assault, and force blast ability. He's also got the fixer skill as well. And then right next to him on the right-hand side, that is Mr. Smug. He is a gang who's armed with a flak armor, shotgun with slug and scatter shots. He's got a last pistol, photo goggles. He's also got a humiliating injury as well. And that pretty much makes up Sergeant Sigmar's deployment on this one. So with deployment over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 1, and both Sister Serial and Sergeant Sigmar roll off for priority to see who goes first. Alright, so that takes us to the top of turn number 1 for the Palanite Enforcers have the initiative on this one. So first off, Sister Serial activates Judge Fear, and using his commanding presence ability, he also activates Judge Mason, as well as Judge Cold, as well as Judge Dodd as well. So you can see in this close up here on the left-hand side, Judge Mason actually takes point using his high strike energy shield to act as a blocking position, and right behind him is Judge Fear. Both those guys move up their normal moon allowance, so that way they can get over to the left-hand side. While that's occurring at the same time, Judge Dodd actually does a double movement, climbing up to the very top of the Alexander department store, looking right at the little peephole there at the top. Now, if you notice in the bottom here, if you're noticing, that's Judge Mason. If you're wondering why he's moving there in the bottom of the screen, he does move on later on. It's just I took this photo after they did a couple of activations on both sides, so that way I can stack my photo shot, my shots accordingly. So he didn't activate, Sister Serial didn't activate Judge Mason, not Judge Mason, Judge Cold. Didn't activate the guy who's in the bottom level of the floor, so don't worry about that part. The fourth person that Sister Serial did activate, however, was Judge Nock, and he's a patrolman who's armed with a sniper rifle. So what he does, he actually takes a basic action, take aim with a sniper rifle, getting him +1 to hit, and the closest target to him is actually all the way across the battlefield, which happens to be Painless Joe, the gang champion for the Sleeping Dogs. Not only does he manage to hit him, he also manages to wound him as well and puts a grievous injury directly onto Painless Joe, dropping down both of his wounds. And the reason why is because the sniper rifle has a knockback rule, and in case you're unfamiliar with that rule is that if the strength of the weapon is higher than the toughness of the toughness of the character, if the strength of the weapon is higher than the strength of the character that's being shot at, it basically causes additional damage on that part as well. So it actually causes 2 wounds, and so just like that, Painless Joe is out for the count. He is no longer participating in the battle report as well. Goes directly in recovery. Luckily for Sergeant Sigmar, though, Reckless, which is the gang right behind him with the grenade launcher, he passes his cool check, no problem, so he pretty much just stands his ground. So, going on to Sergeant Sigmar's very first activation, the person he activates first is his leader, Mr. Sinister, and because he has a commanding presence ability, he activates 3 fighters in the process of doing so. The first fighter he actually activates on the left-hand side, that lady's name is Silk. She's a ganger who just moves up her normal movement allowance to the left-hand side, climbs to the top of that rock bridge there, so that way she can open fire with her gun. He also decides to take aim with Mr. Sinister, getting +1 to hit, and has him open fire with his long rifle directly into Judge Mason. Judge Mason does manage to get hit and also could put a serious injury on him, so because of that he goes crashing face down and starts bleeding out. At the same time, Silk opens up with her auto gun. She does manage to hit Judge Fear twice, but unfortunately for her though, she wasn't able to wound him, so he just lays face up because he is currently pinned. At the same time, Mr. Smug as well as Drix the Maw, they move up their movement value twice, doing double movements, making their way directly down the right-hand side of the battlefield, directly to the Precinct 13 Palanite Enforcers. Cicero then activates the Interceptor, which is the little Cyber Mystique. He actually does a double movement through the building and directly outside the Alexander's apartment store, getting ready to intercept any Delaque fighters that might be coming his way. And since all the Palanite forces have been activated, the rest of the turn is dedicated to Stardust Sigmarine and Sleeping Dogs. First thing he does, he puts a double movement directly onto Reckless. Reckless spends a basic movement to move down from the top of the command center, and also does another movement in order to get closer towards the ambulance that's right in front of him. And for the rest of the turn, the rest of the Sleeping Dogs just kind of rally around the Goliath Rock Crusher right there. So you have John St. Jude as well as Flamer Fred as well as Slyke. Those guys just all kind of move as quick as they possibly can directly to that Rock Trap, just kind of rallying around the middle portion of it. So with the action phase over with, you go directly to the end phase. And during the end phase, Judge Mason managed to make recovery by suffering a flesh wound, so he'll be able to get up on his feet again for the next activation. He is a little bit easier to tough because he drops 1 point in his toughness, but at the same time, though, them's the breaks for the most part. And that pretty much ends up turn number 1 for this one. And that pretty much ends the end of turn number 1. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see in this photo, once again, the members of Precinct 13 are slowly making their way across the battlefield on the right-hand side, kind of doing so cautiously. And at the same time, Sergeant Sigmar is trying to activate his troops to kind of get into blocking positions in order to stop him, stop Sister Cyril from actually making it across the battlefield. And that pretty much makes up turn number 2 on this one. So, turn number 1 on this one. So with turn number 1 over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and both Sergeant Sigmar and Sister Cyril roll off to see who has priority. So with that takes directly to the top of turn number 2 for the House Delaque managed to get the priority on this one. And the very first thing the Sergeant Sigmarine decides to do is activate the Generatorium that he has in his territories, which means that the entire battlefield is now currently in blackout conditions. What that means that all the fighters can only see 3 inches in front of them, and they can't shoot at anything that they can't see for the most part, right? Unless, of course, you happen to fire a weapon without a gun shroud on it, then of course they can fire you that way because they kind of seen your weapon go off. Now, for the Precinct 13 guys is actually a really bad spot for them to be in because they can't really see ahead of them. However, when it comes for the Sleeping Dogs, the entirety of the gang is equipped with photo goggles, so they can actually see 12 inches in front of them as well. So these guys have a huge advantage over their Precinct 13 counterparts. So it'll be kind of interesting to see exactly how that kind of turns out for this battle report. Alright, so for Sergeant Sigmar's very first activation, he activates John St. Jude as well as Flamer Fred. Both those guys make a double movement across the battlefield, directly to that center hedgehog, making their way to the right-hand flank. And they don't have to worry about being shot at because the Precinct 13 guys can only have a visual range of 3 inches ahead of them. For Sister Cyril, she then activates the Interceptor, does a double movement to skirt around the far right-hand side. Looks like she plans on using the Cyber Mystique to charge directly into the House Delaque gangers that are coming up the right-hand flank. Meanwhile, as you can see in this photo as well, Mr. Smug, as well as Drix the Maw, they start making their way across the battlefield to that gantry walkway there, so that way they can start putting some pressure directly onto the Precinct 13. And for Sister Cyril's next activation, she activates both Judge Mason as well as Judge Fear. Both those guys make double movement actions to the far right-hand side of the battlefield, taking cover right behind that little pylon there, so that way they don't get shot at from a distance by the members of the Sleeping Dogs. Unfortunately for Sister Cyril, however, Sergeant Sigmar decides to send in Drix the Maw. Drix the Maw does a basic simple action to move forward directly to within 12 inches of the 2 members of Precinct 13, because unfortunately for him, though, he doesn't have his photo goggles because he's a brute. He can't get those equipment. However, he is now within visual range of those guys, so because he decides to use Psychic Assault directly onto the members of Precinct 13 as well. Managed to put a wound directly onto Judge Mason and managed to pin Captain Fear, Judge Fear there as well. So because of that, both those guys get hit with that Psychic Blast. However, Sister Cyril decides to move at Judge Mason, who moves up his basic movement allowance, so that way he's within 3 inches of Drix the Maw, and he opens fire directly with his Enforcer bolt gun. Managed to get 3 shots off directly onto Drix the Maw, and all 3 shots managed to hit him. Now, in case you're unaware, Drix the Maw is equipped with a Displacer Field, which means that every single time he gets hit, you roll an armor save for him, and on a 4-up, basically, he gets moved back 4 inches into a random direction is what ends up happening. So he gets hit 3 times and manages to save 2 of them. He gets pushed back to the upper left-hand corner 8 inches, so it puts him right behind the patrol car that's right in the middle of the battlefield. And unfortunately for him, he suffers a serious injury from the third shot, so because he goes laying face down, and he is currently bleeding out on the ground right now. For our next activation, Sergeant Sigmar then activates Reckless, who actually spends a double movement to move as quickly as he possibly can around the ambulance towards the center of the battlefield. And Sister Serial does exactly the same thing with Judge Dodd, who does a double movement across the catwalk directly to the top of the first floor there of this little bridge, kind of taking Overwatch position as best he can. Meanwhile, my friend Sergeant Sigmar then activates Slight as well as the rest of his gang, because pretty much the rest of the turn is dedicated to the rest of his gang. Most of the fighters you can see in this photo, because this one's taken after several activations. What's her name? Silk as well as Slight. They both move up their double moon allowance so that way they can get closer to the Precinct 13 members. And Sister Serial does activate Judge Knock, who does a double movement heading directly towards Judge Fear and Judge Mason as well. And for the rest of the turn, Sergeant Sigmar then activates, what's her name? Silk, as well as, sorry, not Silk, Miss Spectre, as well as Mr. Sinister. And both those characters go to the top of the gun mart shanty of the roof, so that way they have good overwatching position, watching the end of the table to make sure that no one escapes. So with the action phase over with, we go directly to the end phase. And during the end phase, Slick, he managed to come in as a random deployment, and the reinforcement on this one that ends up happening is that a random fighter is chosen from the defenders to show up on the table with the usual reinforcement rules. Unfortunately for Sergeant Sigmar, he did fail his role, so because of that, Sister Serial decided to deploy Slick all the way to the left-hand corner of the battlefield, far away from the action where he can't do much of anything. During the recovery portion of the action end phase, Judge Mason, he's still laying face down, still seriously injured. He's not doing much of anything. And the exact same thing happens to Drix the Maw, who is currently laying on the ground, bleeding out for the most part. And that pretty much ends turn number 2 for this one. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield at the end of turn number 2. As you can see, the members of Precinct 13 are kind of jammed up there on the right-hand side, right beneath that little catwalk area right there. And the reason why is because they can't see very far, so they really can't engage their targets at long distance, because blackout conditions are currently on the battlefield. Meanwhile, my friend Sergeant Sigmar is taking advantage of that fact and starting to move his forces as quickly as he possibly can to engage with the members of Precinct 13, because while the blackout conditions are in effect, he does have the cover of darkness to kind of protect him as he tries to close a distance and assault his enemies. So with the end of turn number 2, we go directly to the top of turn number 3, and my friends will roll off for priority to see who goes first. Alright, so that takes directly to the top of turn number 3 for House Delaque. Sergeant Sigmar managed to get the initiative on this one, and the first thing he does, he activates Johnner St. Jude as well as Flamer Fred. Both those guys move up their no moon allowance to close a distance, and Flamer Fred opens up with his flamethrower, aiming it directly at Judge Knock, and unfortunately managed to capture the head of Judge Fear at the same time while he's being shot at with that flamer. And unfortunately for Sister Serial, Judge Knock did catch on fire on that one, so he does end up panic running 11 inches down to the right-hand side of the battlefield, where he crashes right in front of the Alexander's apartment store, seriously injured and at the same time currently on fire. Judge Fear managed to pass his problems whatsoever, so he has nothing to worry about. However, Johnner St. Jude opens fire with both of his last pistols directly into Judge Mason, gets an out cold result because of it. So because of that, Judge Mason goes directly out of action, and that's another victory point. Actually, 2 victory points, because within 6 inches of Judge Fear for the members of the Sleeping Dogs. So with that, Sister Serial then activates Judge Fear as well as Judge Mason. Judge Fear gets onto his feet again, opens fire with his bolt gun, manages to put a serious injury result directly onto Johnner St. Jude, which also caused a panic test real quick for Flamer Fred. Flamer Fred unfortunately fails his panic test, and he runs back, I think, 8 inches when he ends up doing. Now, because he opened fire with the flamethrower, he's no longer enshrouded by the darkness of the blackout conditions. So because of that, Judge Cole then takes a turn to basic action to aim his bolt gun, and takes another basic action to open fire with his bolt gun, manages to hit as well as wound Flamer Fred as well. And here's the aftermath of that shootout. As you can see, Johnner St. Jude is seriously injured. He's laying on the ground bleeding out. At the same time, so is Flamer Fred. He's also suffering a flesh wound too, as he goes crashing face down behind that hedgehog, because they both got gunned down by the members of Precinct 13. So not to be outdone, my friend Sergeant Sigmar then activates Slight next as one of his gangers, who then charges directly into the Interceptor and engages the Interceptor in close combat. And unfortunately for my friend Sister Serial, managed to get the out of action result directly onto the Interceptor. Looks like, what's his name? Slight managed to open fire with both of his auto pistols directly into the Interceptor's head. Managed to put a head injury in that poor thing, so because that loses 1 point to its willpower as well as its intelligence. And after he gets done finishing the Interceptor off, he decides to do a 2-inch follow through to go around the corner, so that way he can start engaging the members of Precinct 13. So, not wanting to be outdone, Cicero then activates Judge Dodd, who does a simple movement to drop down from the top of the catwalk down to the ground level, and then takes a basic action to open fire with his bolt gun at point blank range right in front of the face of Slight. And not only does he manage to hit that guy, he also manages to wound him as well, putting a serious injury directly onto Slight as well as a flesh wound. So because of that, he goes crashing face down to the ground and he is slowly bleeding out. So up next, Sergeant Simmering then activates Reckless, who does a double movement to move as quick as he possibly can to get across the center of the battlefield to that patrol car there on the right hand side, so that way he can start engaging the forces of Precinct 13. And for Sister Serial's final activation, she then activates Judge Nock, who does manage to put the flames out and he gets back onto his feet again, and that pretty much makes up his entire action for this one. So with all the judges from the members of Precinct 13 being activated, the rest of the turn is dedicated to the sleeping dogs. So first of all, Sergeant Simmering then sends up Silk as well as Mr. Slick. They both move up their normal mood allowance. Mr. Smug, I'm sorry, that's his name. They move up their normal mood allowance directly behind Drix the Moss, so that way they can lend some support. And at the same time, Mr. Smug, he basically takes an action to open fire with his shotgun, firing a solid slug shot directly into Judge Dodd. Not only does he manage to hit Judge Dodd, he also managed to put a serious injury on that guy, as well as a flesh wound. So because of that, Judge Dodd goes crashing face down to the ground. He is currently bleeding out with a flesh wound as well. So things are not looking very good for Sister Serial. And for his very last activation, Sergeant Simmering decides to activate Slick. This is the ganger's armed with a bolt gun who came in as reinforcements on the back left-hand side of the table. And he actually does a double movement forward as quick as he possibly can, so that way he can start engaging the members of Precinct 13. And with that, that pretty much ends the action phase for turn number 3. So the action phase over with, we go directly to the end phase, and once again, a member of the Sleeping Dogs shows up on the battlefield. His name is Newbie. Unfortunately for him, though, he actually fails his reinforcement roll, so once again, Cicero puts this guy in the back left-hand corner, because as far away from her fighter as he possibly can. So he arrives there to, do what best he can. And as for the recovery phase on this one, Flamer Freddy managed to roll another flesh wound, so because they rolls over now, he is currently pinned with 2 flesh wounds on him. He's now toughness 1. At the same time, though, he's still got a difference, though, because he is packing a flamethrower still. He can still fight, so he is still a threat, even though he's really easy to wound at this point. Meanwhile, John St. Jude is still laying on the ground, bleeding out, and he is still not doing much of anything. The exact same thing is happening for Drix the Maw, who is still not recovering from being shot at point blank by a bolt gun. And the same sad story is still applied to both Judge Dodd as well as to Slight, as well as both of them are still laying on the ground bleeding out. And that pretty much ends turn number 3 for this one. And I do apologize, I do not have a photo for the end of turn number 3. I do apologize for that one. I really wasn't paying attention to my photographing duty. I was just having too much fun just watching my friends play and, jaw-jacking instead of, paying attention to what I was doing. So I do apologize for that one. So that takes directly to the top of turn number 4, and the Palanite Enforcers get to go first. So the very first thing that ends up happening is that Judge Knott gets back on his feet and charges directly into Slight. Managed to push that guy off with a coup de grace and managed to put a grievous injury directly onto that guy. So netting another victory point for Precinct 13, as well as this guy going directly out of action. As for Sergeant Sigmaring's very first activation, he decides to activate Reckless, who takes a basic action to aim and a basic action to open fire with his grenade launcher. Decides to open it with frag grenades. Unfortunately for him, though, his shot completely misses, and the shot goes wide and doesn't cause anything. So the entire turn was kind of wasted on this poor guy. So for next activation, Cicero then activates Judge Fear, who also decides to activate Judge Cold as well. Judge Fear does try to take a basic action aim, as well as open fire directly into Reckless. Unfortunately for him, though, he did miss his shot, so nothing much really happened from there as well. He also activated, I forgot to mention, he also activated Judge Dodd. Judge Dodd managed to get back on his feet again, and he kind of takes a basic action to go to the right-hand side and move over his normal wound allowance, heading to the right-hand side. And then his final activation, because it's part of a group activation, he decides to activate Judge Cold. Judge Cold does a simple movement, moving through the bottom of the catwalk, so that way he's in 3 inches of Mr. Smug as well as Silk, and then for his second action, he decides to toss a frag grenade directly at them. And to make matters worse, the frag grenade drops right smack dab in the middle of Drix the Maw, Mr. Smug, as well as Silk, and it blows but manages to hit all 3 of those guys in a huge fireball of shrapnel and flame. In the end, though, the frag grenade didn't really do much of anything. All it really did is push back all 3 fighters an inch, as well as pin both Mr. Smug as well as Silk. But at the same time, though, that's also one less action that these guys managed to get because they got a bit back on their feet again. And speaking about getting back on their feet again, once again, Sergeant Sigmarine decides to activate Mr. Smug as well as Mr. Silk because the rest of the fighters of Precinct 13 have all been activated. So Silk as well as Mr. Smug, they both get on their feet again. They both open fire directly at to Judge Cold, but unfortunately for them, though, they missed their shots. And unfortunately for Silk, though, she also got an ammo roll check on that one. So because of that, her gun runs out of ammo, so she will need to spend a simple action to try to reload her gun in the next turn. Meanwhile, on the far left-hand side of the table, both Mr. Smug as well as Newbie do double movements as quick as they possibly can, trying to cross the battlefield in order to engage the members of Precinct 13 from behind. And once again, Flamer Fred, he gets out from assigned position, starts moving up as quickly as he possibly can with double movements, heading behind the Interceptor to engage Judge Mason and the rest of the members of Precinct 13. And actually, I forgot to mention, I did make a mistake in this battle report earlier. Well, I made several mistakes in this battle report, I do apologize. But what's his name? Reckless, the gangers in the back of the grenade launcher. I said that Judge Mason opened fire on a miss, and turns out he actually did manage to hit that guy with a serious injury, as well as put a flesh wound on that guy as well. So, yeah, the entirety of the assaults of the Sleeping Dogs working on to Precinct 13, it is slowly falling apart. So the action phase over with, we go directly to the end phase. And in the end phase, the very last of the House Delaque Reinforcements, Ghost shows up on the right-hand side of the battlefield, and he's only 6 inches away in order to engage Judge Dodd, who's right there on the back. Sorry, not Judge Dodd, Judge Knock. Or the judge's arm with the sniper rifle, who's only 6 inches away from him. And that pretty much makes it the end phase on this one. And unfortunately for my friend Sergeant Sigmarine, all the rest of his fighters are still seriously injured and no changes have taken place for their recovery. And once again, I forgot to take a photo of the end of turn number 4, and I'm really sorry about that one. Like I said, I was just having too much fun talking to my friends instead of paying attention to what I was supposed to do. So with turn 4 over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 5, and both of my friends roll off for priority to see who goes first. Alright, so that takes directly to the top of turn number 5 for House Delaque on this one. So because of this, we go directly to his very first activation, which is Flamer Fred. Flamer Fred decides to, instead of engaging with this Flamer because he really can't hit him at the distance he's at, he decides to take a basic action, aim with his auto pistol, then open fire with his auto pistol directly into Judge Fear. Unfortunately for him, though, he misses his shot, so not much really happens there, and that pretty much wastes the action on him. Meanwhile, Sister Sarah then decides to activate Judge Fear. Judge Fear decides to also do a group activation with Judge Cold. Judge Fear moves up his normal move allowance and opens fire with his bolt gun, while at the same time Judge Cold, decides to throw another frag grenade directly into Silk as well as into Mr. Smug. Both of those House Delaque guys do get seriously injured. Mrs. Silk is injured with the frag grenade. However, it's Judge Fear managed to put a grievous injury directly onto Mr. Smug. So because of that, Mr. Smug does directly go out of action. Also, adds another victory point for the members of the Precinct 13 as well. So in response to that, our friend Sergeant Sigmarine decides to activate Ghost, his juvie, who decides to charge directly into the back of Judge Knock. So because of that, both those guys are engaged in close combat. Unfortunately for Sergeant Sigmarine, though, his plan did backfire as Judge Knock put a grievous injury directly onto Ghost, managed to stove his head in with his maul of his, and because of that, Ghost goes directly out of action as well, netting another victory point for the members of Precinct 13. So for his next activation, he decides to activate Judge Dodd for Cicerial, who decides to do a double movement going forward, going right behind the West Superette, making his way to the other side of the table in order to escape. And for the rest of Sergeant Sigmarine's turns for his two fighters, both Slick as well as for the newbie, basically those guys do double movements as quick as they possibly can, trying to cross the battlefield directly behind the members of Precinct 13. And for Sister Serial's final activation, she decides to activate Judge Knock, who decides to do a double movement to follow up right behind Judge Dodd, as they try to go as quickly as they possibly can across the battlefield in order to escape. So with that being said, that takes us directly to the end phase of turn number 4. And unfortunately for my friend Sergeant Sigmarine, he does bottle out on this one. He manages to fail his battle roll test for the members of the Sleeping Dogs, and because of that, all the Sleeping Dogs on the battlefield will need to take cool checks to see if they stay on the battlefield or not. So for his recovery rolls, unfortunately for Sergeant Sigmarine, Silk fails that, gets out of action result, and suffers a grievous injury, so she goes directly into recovery and scores another victory point for the members of Precinct 13. Meanwhile, Reckless managed to get back on his feet again, so he is all good. However, Sergeant St. Jude, though, he is still seriously injured from taking those bolt gun shells directly to his chest as well. At this point of the game, ladies and gentlemen, my friend Sergeant Sigmarine decides to call the game and decides to voluntarily bottle out because he doesn't want to lose more gangers than he already has. So because of that, that nets another victory for the Palanite Enforcers on this one. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go directly to the post game because this battle report is now officially over.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Alright, so now it's time for the post game. First of all, if we start with the Sleeping Dogs. The Sleeping Dogs actually suffered 5 injuries, and all 5 injuries we're really looking at this one. They all got grievous injuries, so they don't have any permanent effects, but they do go into recovery, so they will miss out the next battle report. And those people are Painless Joe, Silk, Mr. Smug, Slight, as well as Ghost. However, 3 members of the Sleeping Dog did manage to advance. Silk, she leveled up to level 3, earning +1 to her movement. Reckless leveled up to level 3 as well, getting +1 to his toughness, so because of that, he is definitely much harder to destroy and fight against. At the same time, the Juvie Ghost, he also levels up to level 3 as well, earning +1 to his cool stat as well. From their territories, their settlement, they managed to earn 1 point of reputation from their settlement, as well as 60 credits, and from their narco den, they managed to earn 10 credits from that as well. And unfortunate for them, though, they also lost one of their territories in the process of doing that as well. They managed to lose their drinking hole directly towards the Precinct 13 on this one because they lost the battle report. From the trading post, they managed to earn 70 credits for their territories, as well as 90 credits from taking Judge Mason, as well as Judge Cold out during the battle report as well. So they managed to get 90 credits from that. That brings them to a grand total of 160 credits in total. With their 160 credits, they decided to purchase Hotshot Last Packs for John of St. Jude, as well as for Miss Spectre, and they also purchased Gun Shrouds for John of St. Jude, Miss Spectre, Mr. Smug, Slight, Slick, Ghost, as well as Newbie as well. So now almost every single fighter in this gang has both photo goggles as well as gun suppressors, so that way they can be extra super stealthy whenever they decide to use the Generatorium ability in their battle reports. For the reputation, they do earn 1 point of reputation from their settlement, but they lose that point of reputation for bottling out in this scenario. That brings a grand total of 23 points of reputation in total. The new record now is at 5 wins as well as 6 losses, and the new gang rating now is at 2,501 points. Now, for the members of Precinct 13, 2 members of the squad got taken out of action. That was Judge Mason as well as the Interceptor. Judge Mason got an out cold result, while the Interceptor suffered a head injury, losing 1 point to his will as well as 1 point to his intelligence. For their advancements, Judge Fear leveled up to level 4, earning +1 to his cool stat, and Judge Knock leveled up to level 3, earning +1 to his movement as well. So he's a very quick sniper. From their territories, from their Palanite Precinct, they managed to earn 1 point of reputation as well as 20 credits, and they managed to capture a drinking hole from the Sleeping Dogs, which they decided to use a police action on, in which case they cleared out the crime in that area through raids and also making some major busts, and they also earned 2 additional points of reputation from that. In the trading points, they earned 20 credits, and with those 20 credits, they purchased a Hot Shot laser pack for Judge Vasquez. For the reputation, they earned 2 points of reputation for the scenario, 1 point from their Palanite Precinct, as well as 2 points from policing up their drinking hole, bringing their grand total to 35 points of reputation in total. Their new record now is at 5 wins as well as 3 losses, and the new rating is at 2,305 points. So that's going to do it for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy.